the reason commission is looked at, obviously, is because it's an easy way to hide to try and hide a bribe, particularly if you go through an agent. So a typical deal in some industries would be, I want to get a contract in country X. I don't have operations in country X, so I'll appoint an agent. And I will pay that agent a commission on the contract size. Now, what's the size of that commission? Well, you know, in many industries, a typical size of commission might be between 5 and 10%. But in some industries, we have found, particularly through the legal cases that come out, that commissions have been paid of perhaps 30 to 40%. Well, does that mean that that is a particularly good agent? Or does that mean that what they have done is take the additional 20 to 30% and bribe somebody? It may well be that they've bribed somebody. So that is the way that many industries have worked in certain countries. And the size of commission, and particularly anything that's anomalous by industry standards, is often a good pointer. So one thing you might look at is commission size. And certainly I think some of the statements by the Department of Justice in the US have been very much that they have looked at commission sizes, and they're an automatic sort of trigger for further research and investigation into a company if it appears to be paying commissions that are disproportionately large. So commission size is an obvious one. But, you know, it's really important to stress there is nothing illegal about commissions at all. But if commissions are being used to pay bribes, then they are illegal. So I think the other thing you need to know about commissions is, are they being used to pay bribes? And that's what you really need to sort out. And I've absolutely no idea whether that is, you know, has ever happened in your industry or whether it's entirely prevalent in your industry. But that's the kind of thing you need to discuss as an industry, I think. There's been great discussion, incidentally, around, you know, by lawyers and various others around the Bribery Act, is to what extent, you know, how far can you extend this? That is your agent's agent, if they pay a bribe, does that come back to the client, you know, the original client? And the truth is that it's not specified in the Act, precisely because if it was specified, you know, if it's only 2 links in the chain, then you're responsible, but if it's 10 links you're not, then of course anybody who wants to pay a bribe will put a chain of 10 links in place. So it's deliberately not specified. But on the other hand, companies are legitimately worried, you know, well, if I use an agent here in the UK and they use an agent overseas who contracts to a third party, you know, that's so far from my area of control, how on earth can I, you know, how on earth can I control that? But I think companies are sufficiently worried about this that when they are making, you know, bookings through that kind of chain, they will start to put much more pressure on you as agents to say, well, how do you know the agent you're appointing in Russia is not paying bribes to somebody? You know, how do you know that? Because even though my liability might be, you know, lessened because there are several links in the chain, I want to protect myself, so I want you as the agent in the UK to make sure that you're protecting me by making sure that the agent you're appointing overseas is protecting me. And that does, you know, that does become difficult. So, but on the other hand, you know, and again, this might be something you address as an industry, that there are industry-wide procedures in some industries, and defence is another example, as is construction, where there is sort of an accreditation scheme for overseas agents. So you can appoint an agent overseas who has this accreditation, which basically means they're vetted periodically to make sure they're not charging unusual commissions or known for paying bribery or you know, have convictions for bribe paying or a reputation for that. First off, I would say that sort of Daily Mail test, I think, is quite an important one. You know, if you would be worried, not for competitive reasons, you know, there are reasons why you might keep your commissions level secret for competitive advantage, but if you were worried about it coming in the public domain because you would be embarrassed about its level, then, you know, it may be that a reasonable person in the UK sitting on a jury would think actually that commission was paying a bribe. So if you're trying to gain undue business advantage, that's a phrase that's often sort of used around the bribery areas in legislation around the world, improper advantage or undue business advantage by paying a commission, then you might have a problem. And in many industries, it might be that you pay a commission to an individual counterparty, so a salesperson in another agency, for instance, and you say the average commission in the industry would be 10%, and you pay 20% because you think that's going to help you get more business. Well, that's not illegal necessarily, but if part of that 10% is part of that 20% is that the individual who's your counterparty takes 10% for themselves, and that might be 10% in the form of free hotel rooms you're giving them, or an iPad, or it might be that 10% in it might be in other forms. If they're getting that for individual advantage, and that means they're no longer making an objective business decision, then it may be you have actually paid a bribe. Well, I would say in principle, there are reasons why it would consider not to be a bribe, that it's a heightened level of commission. I guess one of the questions would be about transparency around that, and you ask transparency to whom? It might be transparency to the end client. So is everybody involved in that transaction aware that there is enhanced commission payable in some circumstances? So that would be one consideration. If there is individual benefit, and as a result of that individual benefit, which you might describe as an incentive, the individual making a decision is actually making a skewed business decision. It may be that you've actually got an improper advantage, and so you have actually paid a bribe, whether that's a cash payment to the individual, or an iPad, or free hospitality somewhere, or whatever. So I would be pretty wary about that. Again, I would sit down with the industry group and a lawyer to try and tease out some very definite case studies like that, because I think that will give you much better industry-specific guidance. But I suspect, in that case, some of it might be fine, some of it might not be fine. But you need to be pretty cautious about that kind of scenario.